Luke had been on the road for many days, the long hours in the saddle taking their toll on him. His back ached from the constant movement and his eyes were tired from the dust and the sun. He was a debt collector, a man known for his rough ways and unyielding attitude. In his line of work, he had seen it all: people who tried to hide from their debts, those who begged for more time, and even a few who had tried to fight him off. But none of that bothered him. He was used to it. He had a job to do and he intended to get it done no matter what it took. This time, though, the task wasn't going to be easy. Luke was heading to a small frontier town, nestled at the edge of the vast wilderness. The town had seen better days and its people lived on the edge of survival. A wealthy landowner had hired Luke to collect a debt from the nearby native tribe. The amount was substantial, and the landowner was not someone who would tolerate an unpaid bill. But as Luke rode toward the town, he knew this wouldn't be like any other debt collection he had done before. The people in this part of the country had long had a tense relationship with the native tribes. The settlers viewed them as obstacles to their growth, while the native people saw the settlers as invaders, encroaching on their land and way of life. Luke had heard stories about the tribe, the Red Feather tribe, named after their strong and respected leader, Chief Red Feather. They were known for their fierce independence and their unwillingness to bow to anyone, especially outsiders. Luke knew this would be a challenge, but he wasn't one to back down from a fight. When Luke arrived in the town, he was greeted with uneasy stares. The townspeople knew what he was there to do, and most of them didn't want any part of it. They had their own troubles and didn't want to get involved in what was bound to be a difficult and dangerous situation. But Luke didn't need anyone's help. He was used to being alone, and that was the way he preferred it. He made his way to the local saloon where he knew he could find information about the Red Feather tribe. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of tobacco smoke and spilled whiskey. A few rough-looking men sat at a table in the corner, talking in low voices. The bartender, a wiry man with a thin mustache, gave Luke a nod as he walked in. He had seen Luke before, knew his reputation, and kept his distance. Luke didn't care for small talk, so he didn't waste time. He went straight to the point. "I'm here to see Chief Red Feather," Luke said, his voice deep and steady. "I've come to collect a debt." The bartender hesitated for a moment, then wiped a glass clean with a rag. "You're not the first one to come looking for him," he said. "But you might be the last. Chief Red Feather doesn't take kindly to outsiders telling him what to do." Luke didn't respond right away. He had dealt with stubborn men before, and he knew this would be no different. "I've been hired to collect, and I intend to do just that," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The bartender didn't say anything more. Instead, he gestured toward the door and nodded toward the hills in the distance. "You'll find the Red Feather tribe over there near the river," he said. "But I wouldn't go if I were you. Those people are fierce. They don't trust anyone." Luke simply nodded, tipping his hat to the bartender before he left the saloon. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the town as he saddled his horse and set off in the direction the bartender had pointed. The ride was long and quiet, with only the sound of the wind and the rhythmic thud of the horse's hooves on the ground. Luke wasn't bothered by the silence. He was used to it, but something about this journey felt different, as though he was heading into unknown territory, a place where he wouldn't be in control. As Luke approached the river, he saw the Red Feather tribe's camp in the distance. The tents were set up in a circle, the smoke from the fires rising into the air. The tribe was smaller than he had expected, but there was an air of strength about them, something that made Luke pause for a moment before he rode forward. He could see the tribal members moving about their camp, some standing, some sitting by the fires, and others talking in hushed voices. Their faces were stern, and their eyes watched Luke carefully as he approached. He dismounted and made his way toward the center of the camp, where he was met by Chief Red Feather. The chief was a tall, imposing man, his long black hair braided and his face painted with intricate symbols. His eyes were sharp and there was a quiet power in his gaze. He didn't smile as he looked at Luke, but there was a sense of recognition in the way he studied him. "I've come to collect the debt," Luke said, his voice steady but firm. The chief didn't respond right away. He simply regarded Luke with a calm expression. Then after a long pause, he spoke. "You want payment for something that is not ours to give," Chief Red Feather said, his voice low but filled with authority. "We owe nothing to the settlers. Nothing." Luke was taken aback by the chief's defiance. He had expected resistance, but this was different. The chief wasn't afraid, and he wasn't going to be intimidated. Luke felt a flicker of respect for the man, but that didn't change the fact that he had a job to do. "We don't have much time," Luke said, his voice growing more insistent. "I've been sent to collect this debt. It's a matter of business." The chief's gaze never wavered. "You will not take anything from us," he said, his tone cold. Luke knew the conversation wasn't going anywhere, so he decided to offer something that might change the chief's mind. "What if I take something else?" he asked. The chief raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but also wary. "What do you mean?" "I'll take your daughter," Luke said, his voice flat, "in exchange for the debt." For a moment the chief was silent. Then without warning he nodded. "You may take her," he said, "but she is not a payment. She is not a prize to be won. She is her own person." Luke didn't understand what the chief meant by that, but he wasn't about to argue. He had come to collect a debt, and if this was the way it would be paid, he would take it. He turned to leave, but then, as he was about to mount his horse, something unexpected happened. From behind the chief, a woman stepped forward. She was tall, with long dark hair and a fierce look in her eyes. She was dressed in the traditional clothes of the tribe, a strong, confident presence. She wasn't what Luke expected. She was beautiful, but there was something more to her, a sense of power and independence that was hard to ignore. She stepped up to him, her eyes locked onto his. "I claim him as my husband," she said, her voice clear and strong. Luke froze, his hand still on the reins of his horse. He hadn't expected this, not in the least. But there was something in the way she spoke, in the way she carried herself, that made Luke pause. This wasn't just a simple offer or a barter. This woman, this Waya, was claiming him, and in that moment he realized that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't predict. Luke was taken aback by Waya's bold claim. His first instinct was to laugh it off, to reject the idea outright. After all, he was a man of business, not one for marriages of convenience. He had come to collect a debt, not to marry a woman he had just met. But there was something about her that made him hesitate. She wasn't afraid, not in the least. There was strength in her eyes, in the way she stood before him, and Luke found himself momentarily uncertain about how to respond. "What did you say?" Luke asked, his voice thick with disbelief. He had to be sure he had heard her right. Waya didn't flinch. She stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "I claim you as my husband," she repeated, her voice clear and firm. "I am Waya, daughter of Chief Redfeather. I belong to you now." The words seemed impossible, yet they hung in the air like a weight pressing down on Luke's chest. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. He had come for a simple debt collection, but now, in a matter of moments, his whole world had shifted. "You're serious?" Luke asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Waya's eyes told him everything he needed to know. She was not joking. "Serious," she replied without hesitation. "It is our way, a payment for the debt owed. But more than that, I claim you as my husband. It is my right." Luke's mouth went dry as he tried to process what was happening. This wasn't a simple trade. This wasn't some offer of a token gesture. Waya wasn't offering herself as payment. She was taking him, marking him as hers. It was a custom he didn't understand, but there was no mistaking the strength in her words. Chief Redfeather watched the exchange from behind, his expression unreadable. He gave a slight nod as though giving his blessing. Luke could feel the weight of his gaze, steady and unyielding. The silence stretched for what seemed like an eternity. Luke's hand was still gripping the reins of his horse, but his mind was elsewhere, torn between the strange customs of the tribe and the life he had known. He had no intention of staying here longer than necessary, but the force of Waya's claim was hard to ignore. "I came for a debt," Luke said, trying to regain control of the situation. "Not for this." Waya stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "The debt is paid," she said softly, yet there was an edge to her voice. "But I have claimed you, and you cannot leave now." Luke swallowed hard. He had come to collect a debt, but now he was tangled in something far more complicated than he had imagined. He didn't know how to escape this. He didn't know how to reject her without causing conflict that could escalate into something far worse. The chief stepped forward then, breaking the tense silence. His deep voice echoed in the air as he spoke. "She has claimed you, Luke. It is done. If you accept, you will take her as your wife. If you refuse, you will not leave here unscathed. Luke looked at the chief, his gaze searching for any sign of weakness, any loophole he could exploit to get out of this situation. But there was nothing. The chief was resolute, and so was Waya. It was clear that this was not a simple offer of marriage. This was a binding custom, one that carried deep cultural significance. Waya's presence was powerful, and Luke could feel the tension between them grow stronger. She didn't speak of love, of affection, or even of choice. She spoke of duty, of tradition. She wasn't asking for his consent. She was claiming him, and Luke's place in the world was shifting in ways he could never have anticipated. For a moment, Luke thought about refusing, about riding away and leaving this strange situation behind. He could go back to his life as a debt collector, continue with the work he knew so well. But something inside him stirred, a curiosity, a need to understand what was happening. He wasn't just a collector of debts anymore. He had been thrust into a world he didn't understand, and as much as he wanted to resist, a part of him was drawn to Waya. His gaze met hers, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes, not just strength, but something softer, something human. She wasn't a payment. She wasn't a prize. She was a woman with her own will, her own story, and her own place in the world. And somehow he found himself wanting to learn more about her, even if it meant stepping into a life he hadn't chosen. "All right," Luke said at last, his voice quiet but firm. "I'll stay. But know this, I didn't come here for this. I didn't come for a wife." Waya didn't smile, but her eyes softened ever so slightly. "It is not about what you came for," she replied. "It is about what the world has brought us to. We are bound by what has happened, by the choices we now must make." The chief nodded once more, as if the matter was settled. "It is done, then. You will take her with you, and your debts will be settled." Luke glanced at Waya again. She wasn't looking at him with affection, but there was a quiet understanding between them, something unspoken. The connection between them had been formed, not by his choice, but by hers and by the customs of her people. And now, he had to figure out what that meant for his future. As the chief and the others of the tribe watched, Luke turned and walked toward his horse. Waya followed him, her movements confident, unhurried. She mounted her own horse, sitting tall in the saddle, her gaze fixed ahead. There was no hesitation in her actions, no uncertainty. She had claimed him, and now they would ride together. They set off, leaving the Red Feather tribe behind them, but Luke couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in him, something deeper than he could understand. This wasn't the life he had imagined. But as he looked over at Waya, riding beside him with the wind blowing through her hair, he realized that the life he had known was over. And whether he liked it or not, this new journey with her by his side had only just begun.